All right, so I'll get right into it. You know our new format. If you've watched our first 4 episodes for 2026, it's much different. I've shared a few things in the last few episodes. Wanted to make this conversation today with myself and you about where a lot of this has come from in my break that I took away from the show last year. So, at some point, it dawned upon me in season 6 that I really needed to take a break. Long story short, we had about 5 or 6 guests that were set up to have conversations with me. And for many different reasons, all fell through, unreschedulable, unschedulable for the near future at that time. And I didn't really feel like pushing the season out for too much longer. And I felt like I needed to walk away from it. And this is very common actually amongst creatives, musicians, and artists, podcasters, and the like. And it usually happens when something needs to change. When we know as creatives that what we're doing is a good thing and that we mean well and that the people we're inviting into it mean well, but we know something needs to change. And I know a lot of folks that have known me from this podcast exclusively for a long time think and sometimes verbalize things to me that I should improve on the show. Some examples being thumbnails, uh, shorter conversations, catchier reels, engaging in clickbait tactics, things like that. I'm not knocking any of those approaches, not one of them. In fact, if you've noticed the last 4 thumbnails on YouTube, I am taking a much stronger approach with how I want to attract people to this show. And it's becoming more and more about the people and less about business. In fact, I don't I don't know that I could say that Kansas City Business Cast has been focused on businesses because I launched it out of conversations that I was having with business owners from regular networking activities and client activities with other business owners. But I've always cared more about the person's story and what makes them who they are, how their decisions have formed who they are. And if I could just be straight up honest with you, my favorite conversations that we've had on this show, and I think every conversation I've had has been able to hold up in its own right. And when I say this, I'm not knocking by any means any other guests that I've had, but my favorite conversations are the ones where people were vulnerable, really opened up, were very honest about where they've come from, where they are now, and where they're going. And when they bring some content to the table as well, I have a lot of fun doing that. And I've been on some other shows, so I've gotten a chance to learn and see how some other folks have done this podcasting thing as well. Shout outs to Phil and Corey from Two Fingers. They were the ones who first had me on a podcast when I just had 9 episodes out. You guys need to bring your show back, by the way. I know you know that, but love you guys. Huge shout out to Gabriel Garcia from To Bring About Podcast. He's brought me on his show twice. John and Esau over at I-70 Podcast. You guys know how much I appreciate you. Dominique and Darren and Keith from Indelible Arts having me on Indelibly Marked to tell my story. So appreciative of you. And the guys from Tour Buds as well. I'm sorry, Derek and Andy. Thanks, guys, for having me on the show to talk about the old band days as well. Really appreciate it. But I've learned so much more from being on these other shows To bring it back to my original point, I learned a lot. I learned a lot in podcasting. And when we had such difficulty with season 6, and I realized like I was studying for a big time exam to get a big time certification. I had just been promoted my full time position and had some travel for work coming up that I didn't really have the stomach for kicking these last few interviews out. And when you are pulling people along and there's really no real enthusiasm, and you've got to kind of let people go at some point. I'm not saying that as an excuse to let people go in your personal life, or like if there's a relative that's been pissing you off for the last 10 years. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is there's just times where you have to let things go. You really do. Got to let them go. And I think if more of us did that, I think we'd get a lot more clarity in our life, because especially entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs and creatives and like podcasters and stuff, we are very stubborn because we are told that we need to be stubborn and we need to hold the opinions of others with a grain of salt. We're told advice. We're given a lot of bad advice about what it takes to be successful. And obviously, if you're still listening to me, you know what it's like to support local podcasters, local creatives. Why should you care about my opinion, right? Odds are, if you care about my opinion or what I have to say, it's because we actually have a relationship. I've met you, or you've known me since before the podcast, or you just joined and you've heard me share some things on the show recently or on other shows that has made you feel like there's a connection there. Like we sort of understand each other. And for that, I thank you. But we are given a lot of bad advice. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have business folks and nonprofit folks and podcasters and creatives on this show was because I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to make a vehicle or a mechanism for people to learn a bit more about leaders in Kansas City. And whether you respect them or not, everyone that's been on the show has been a boss in their own right, in their own way. And I saw that in them. Okay. And in many ways, I still see that. I still see an opportunity in Kansas City to feature Kansas City business owners. But what I learned about making a Kansas City specific show, and I was told this in the beginning and I didn't listen, or I listened, but I figured I'll give it a shot and see how it goes. But I was told that if you make it about Kansas City, it's going to seriously limit your growth. It's going to limit your audience. Don't make it about Kansas City. My resistance to that was, I understand your perspective, but I feel like these are the people that I'm going to get to do life with. I've said this on earlier episodes. People in my community that I get to do life with, businesses I support, my kids go to school with their kids. We go to the same churches, all that. I just wanted to make something for Kansas City. Excuse me. And in 2023, when I started doing this research, I mean, it seemed like every Kansas City specific podcast was either from a realtor or somebody who was famous in the sports world and decided to make a podcast. And there were a bunch of dead podcasts, a bunch of podcasts that had like 5 episodes, 6 episodes, and had not updated their Spotify or YouTube feed in years. And so I felt like, I was like, you know what? Kansas City Business Cast, the name isn't taken. I really like the way it sounds. KCBC reminds me of the old KROQ, KLOS stations I listened to in California when I was growing up. And it almost sounds like AC/DC, one of my favorite rock bands. So I was like, you know what? It's not taken. And I realized that it was kind of a newish thing for 2023. There were a lot of podcasts that started up in 2020. A lot of them. But you'll see this, you'll recognize this too, especially those in the podcast space, that it takes a lot of work to make a podcast and to be consistent. And it's hard, right? All that's bringing back to the original point of when I started Kansas City Business Cast, I thought, you know what? I'll never run out of people to interview. I'll never run out because there's always a new business. We have our friends at Porterhouse KC. Shout out Sharon. Shout out Dan, Miranda. Sharon and Dan sponsored this show. Black Drip Coffee was one of our sponsors. Love those guys. Still have all my Black Drip swag, all my stuff. A little cigar box. They have business. They have a business program. They've got cohorts. They're raising up entrepreneurs. I saw that happening. I saw that people were moving to Kansas City. The Chiefs had been crushing it up to that point, right? So Royals had won the World Series. There's a lot of exciting stuff that was happening in Kansas City. A lot of things that made, my microphone, that really made me proud. And so I went on and endeavored, and I started with having people on the show that were my friends from my networking group and clients that I had through VAS LLC. People that I met in the hallways at the studio, like Cam F. Awesome. I met him passing a meeting room, getting introduced to him. My friend Heather Snyder, who is now Heather Gertis and has been on the show twice. She runs Promote AI, another previous sponsor of our show. Shout out Heather. And then Cam was probably one of the first, probably the most famous, coolest guy that I'd met up to that point that actually followed through and came on the show. And so started getting a lot of momentum, right? As time went on, as I started to see that other podcasts were coming up and there were other shows that were around when I was doing research, but I just didn't see them. There were so many more shows here in Kansas City, so many more podcasts. And I saw that there were other folks having similar themes and stuff. And I've never seen these other podcasts as competition. I want to make that very clear before I say what I'm about to say next. That I have always had the mindset that we are all in this city, in this region together. We're all together. Like, we should support each other. We should not get jealous if we have a guest on and then the other person has them on for longer or gets more out of that guest that then makes that podcast more popular. There's just a lot of things that like I really held to, okay? And as I met other podcasters, I saw a mixture of that, right? I think most are very supportive. Others are just silent and you can't really gauge that. So I can't really see if they're adversarial against other Kansas City podcasts or not. But I do think we have a mostly majority supportive culture here in Kansas City. But as I got a flooded inbox, and any podcaster who has a consistent podcast with enough listeners and growing subscribers and decent channel analytics will know that you get inbox invitations to people who want to help you edit your show, produce your show, people that tell you how crappy your SEO metrics are, and that's why you're not getting enough views or click through. And then people who are from marketing firms representing people from other places in the world and in the United States, pitching their guests to your show saying, hey, I've got this person who makes custom balloon party decorations in Los Angeles, and I think he'd be a great fit for your show. He grew his business from, $200,000 a year to $1 million, and it's all custom balloon creations. And if you're sitting here listening, laughing at that, that is legitimately a real business. This is a real guy. And as I think about how I turned him down a few months back because he wasn't a Kansas City-based business, that probably would have been a pretty interesting interview. And so, again, remember, I don't forget my point here. Anybody that knows me knows I will ramble, but I will always come back to the point. My original point was that when I took my break, I had some reflection. And I said, you know what? I think it's time to open it up outside of Kansas City. And so far, nobody has told me that they think that's wrong. that I shouldn't carry the name Kansas City Business Cast? There's two reasons for that. One, I don't think people enough know because not enough people care. And that's something that every podcaster needs to hear. If you put a reel out there or you say something on a show, that does not mean it's been galvanized in stone in every household across America. People don't know. And most people, honestly, they do not care. They don't care about your show. Okay. I've realized that people don't know. That's the first thing. And the second thing is because maybe they're thinking the same thing, or maybe they want to talk to me about it. I'm talking about people that are close to me, right? You'll notice I haven't said welcome to Kansas City Business Cast. You might notice that. See, I got to stop doing that too, is say, you'll notice, remember. Because my show, it's a small show. And I have a couple handfuls of people. I think they show up every episode that I put out. And they're probably listening to me say this right now. And again, all of you, I appreciate you. I'd start name dropping you, but I know I'd forget somebody. I don't want to make anybody feel left out, but we've had diehard people, diehard supporters. But going back to that whole focus on Kansas City and why I'm now choosing to go outside of Kansas City as well, not excluding Kansas City, but going outside of Kansas City is because I want to be able to have more conversations with people who are not known in Kansas City. I think after being here for 11 years, I have a right, just as much a right to say this as anybody else. But we like us, and that's a great thing. We like us. And because of that, we've all kind of had each other on the same shows, all that stuff. And again, I am not saying that that's bad, but I want to introduce people in Kansas City to other folks as well. And if I could be completely honest, if I could turn back time, I probably would have named this podcast something different. I wouldn't have hid the fact that I was having people from Kansas City on the show. I would not hide the fact that I'm in Kansas City, but the name and the core values, I think, really limited what we were able to do with this show. And now we're going into this new era where y'all might know, there I go, assuming you know again. You may have heard me say, I want to get to 100 episodes. That's a goal of mine. And as you may or may not have heard me on other shows talk about, there are other topics that are non-related to business that I am very enthusiastic about. That is why I've stopped editing myself on this show, because to be honest, every single episode I've done has a tangent. A lot of them embarrassing tangents on my part. I had a moment a long time ago where I had a guest on the show and I went on this Deadpool rant, and looking back, it would have been really funny for me to keep that in there, but I thought that it might make my guest be embarrassed of coming on the show. I had to realize that there's this balance of being professional and being authentic and trying to find a way to bring those two things in the middle so that there's like authenticity. And that's what I've started doing with the 2026 episodes. Not editing, sharing a little bit more about my life and my perspective, a little bit of my political views, which, to be honest, maybe we should talk about that too. I don't have a political affiliation. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat. And that's excluded me from certain elections. Also doesn't mean I don't vote. I definitely vote. I definitely care about politics. But I have this ability to see things from both sides or see things from multiple perspectives that people who are usually on one side or the other, neither of them really appreciate. Very frustrating when you believe so strongly in something and then you meet somebody who is ambivalent to whatever cause that you are extremely passionate about. That is very frustrating. I know from personal experience. There are times in my life where I was very, very adamant about certain political positions and things like that. And going back to that, I'm not part of a political affiliation thing. That does not mean that I'm neutral or lukewarm. There are things that I feel very strongly about. I also know if you listen to KCBC, odds are you're not here for that kind of content. Just because I have thoughts and opinions on things doesn't mean that you need to hear them all. Some folks might disagree with that. I've heard a lot of people lately say that everything's political, like work is political, healthcare is political, therapy is political, uh, dentistry is political. And because I can see things from other perspectives, I'll agree to an extent because politics are central to people and we can't help but be passionate about causes and things. But I'm from a day and age when, you know, what you believed shouldn't have and didn't matter to your caregiver or to the people that were teaching your kids at school or your healthcare provider or the guy who sold you cars or the the favorite outlet you liked going to buy shirts from. And there was a time when we were able to separate this. Believe it or not, we were at one time able to separate politics from people and who they were at the core, and we could honor people and we could disagree and we could find common ground. There was a time where that was more prevalent than the times we live in now. And in a way, that is where, let's see, what am I trying to say here? In a way, I want to bring some of that back when I mean, not back, like I don't expect people to accept it wide scale, but I want to live as an example that we can have friends that we disagree with strongly on politics, and we can still love them for who they are. That we can understand there are things that should still be private, like your medical record. I believe in that. I believe that no one except my authorized caregivers should have access to my health records. And during COVID, that just all got blown up. All of a sudden, the public should know, right? The public should know where you stand on shelter in place, the vaccine, all that. That's where I really saw a lot of this happen. And going back to my personal beliefs, believing in Jesus. Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior. I've said it many times on this show. I've had other Christian business owners and leaders on this show, and I've never been ashamed to say that on other shows that I've gone on, or even when I have a guest on that I know doesn't know Jesus or doesn't follow Jesus, or maybe they have a different belief system. It's okay. It's not my job. It's not my job to enforce my beliefs on other people. And as I'm sitting here 24 minutes in, I'm not going to edit this. Again, I'm not going to edit this. Uh, I'm realizing that, and those of you who are still on this or have listened might be seeing it too, that I am changing my approach to this whole podcasting thing. And still don't know what the future looks like. I do know that I like having these conversations, and I would love to see more people get involved. I would love to see uh, more guests contact me to come on the show. I'd love to see more engagement on the socials. But I've also learned to let go of those things too, to not care so much about that stuff. I've had people have told me, like, "You shouldn't post 2 posts in one day on Instagram, man. You should wait. You should post at peak time. You should be about your SEO." And I'm at the point where basically I'm gonna have to pay people to care about those things because I just can't. I need to make these talks about the people that I have in front of me. I have a strong enthusiasm to get back to in-person conversations again. We used to do that. Our first 20 something episodes, 22, I think, were all in person. Sharon Thompson was the last person that I interviewed in person on KCBC. But video is expensive. Having the right cameras is expensive. Stephanie and I are saving for our first camera. We want a Sony FX30. Man, that will change the visual quality on my end on this show. But I've got big dreams, big hopes, big aspirations, big prayers for this show. And again, if you're still listening, I so appreciate you. Thank you for supporting this podcast. Thank you for supporting me. And if you have feedback, I'd love to get it in a DM, direct message, or shoot me an email. The comments section is not a place where I'm willing to talk about improving the show. The comments section is also not a place where I'm willing to talk about people you think should be on the show. I want to have those conversations privately. I want to know what can I do. And because this would all be a waste of my time if I didn't ask. If there are ways that you want to support this show or support me as a creator in sponsorship or having a creative collaboration or anything like that, I'm also super open to that and would love to do some creative stuff as well with you, your business, your nonprofit, whomever. Now you know a little bit more about me, things that I'm passionate about, and I look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you.